10 is looking at gender inequality. And before we begin, I do want to say there is a difference between sex and gender. Sex refers to the biological differences, and gender is the social definitions and expectations which are associated with being male or female. Sexism is the belief that innate psychological, behavioral, and/or intellectual differences exist between men and women, and that these differences connote the superiority of one group and the inferiority of the other. Discerning the basis for discrimination is often difficult, and class, that's all sexism is discrimination based on sex. And the reason why it's difficult is because of the different types of minority statuses may intersect. For example, double or triple jeopardy occurs when a person is a member of two or more minority groups. So it is kind of hard, like I said, to discern the basis for discrimination because of the many different types of minority status. There is no country in the world in which men and women have equal status. Certain class gender inequality varies across cultures, not only in its extent or degree, but also in its forms. We have a concept called structural sexism, and what this is the ways in which the organizations of society and its institutions subordinate individuals and groups based on sex classification. And one thing that we can look at is education and structural sexism. Worldwide, women are less likely than men to be literate, in other words, read and write, due to millions of women being denied access to even the most basic education. Looking at work and structural sexism, in 2008, women made up 40.4% of the world's total labor force. We do have a concept called occupational sex segregation, and this is a concentration of women in certain occupations, men in other occupations. Women are still heavily represented in the low prestige, low wage, pink collar jobs that offer few benefits. And if you don't know what a pink collar job is, these are just jobs that women have historically been channeled into, such as secretarial, clerical type work, early childhood education, and we can go on and on and on with those. Class, even when women work in those higher paying jobs, they may be victimized by what is known as a glass ceiling. This is an open, invisible barrier that prevents women and other minorities from moving into those top corporate positions. We also find that working mothers may experience a motherhood penalty in which they are evaluated as less competent and committed to work than non-mothers. And they feel pressured to choose professions that permit flexible hours and career paths. Now, class, this is sometimes known as mommy tracks. There are many arguments why there is still an income gap between men and women in the United States. We have what is known as the human capital hypothesis. And this is the theory that pay differences result from differences in men and women's education, skills, training, work experience. We have a devaluation hypothesis, which is the hypothesis that women are paid less because the work they do is socially defined as less valuable than the work performed by men. Comparable worth refers to the belief that individuals in occupation should be paid equally if the job requires comparable levels of education, training, and responsibility. United States women received the right to vote in 1920 with the passage of the 19th Amendment, but women still play a rather minor role in the political arena. Discrimination still occurs in the workplace, as evidenced by the thousands of grievances filed each year with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And I want to say discrimination, although illegal, still takes place at both the institutional and the individual levels. Just to give you an example, in the United States, women often have difficulty obtaining home mortgages or rental property because they have lower incomes, shorter work histories, and less collateral. We also have a concept known as cultural sexism. These are the ways the culture of society, such as norms, values, beliefs, symbols, perpetrates the subordination of an individual or a group based on sex. One example, class, is in family relations. Certainly from birth, males and females are treated differently. We buy toys for each child, okay, if you will, male and female children that convey different messages about appropriate gender roles. As far as the household division of labor, globally, women and girls continue to be responsible for the household maintenance, and women are responsible for the majority of hours of unpaid labor. This is known as the second shift. As far as the school experience and cultural sexism, boys are at a higher risk for learning disabilities. They tend to lag behind in reading and writing scores. And I want to say that this problem exists not only in the United States, but throughout the developed world. Religion and cultural sexism. Class research indicates that women attend religious services more often. They rate religion as more important in their lives, and they're more likely to believe in an afterlife than are men. The feminization of poverty. Class, this is a tendency for women to be disproportionately poor. That is evidenced in developing nations where suitable housing, clean water, food, health care, and sanitary living conditions are scarce. Women in the United States do make up the majority of minimum wage workers, and they are significantly more likely to live in poverty than men. There are two groups of women that's most likely to be poor in the United States, and these are women who are head of households with dependent children, and women over the age of 65 who have outlived their spouses. Looking at some social, psychological cost of gender socialization, class, significant others through the socialization process do expect certain behaviors and prohibit others based upon our birth sex. Certainly adolescent girls are more likely to be dissatisfied with their looks, including physical attractiveness, appearance, and body weight, than adolescent boys are. Boys, too, from an early age are concerned about their body image, and we can go on and on and on and talk about this, class, but gender roles are slowly changing, and this is known as gender tourism. Women are now serving in the military. Men are dieting and undergoing cosmetic surgery, and we can go on and on and on with different examples of how gender roles are slowly changing. it seems like the lines that once defined masculine and feminine identity are blurring. As far as health, the impact of gender socialization on death and illness, certainly men are less likely to go to a doctor than women. They have poor health. They're at a higher risk of mortality than females at every stage of life. And I want to say that men in the United States do die about 6 years earlier than women. Women do have a longer life expectancy than males. Overall, men are more likely than women to be involved in violence. Women and girls are also the victims of male violence worldwide. As many as 71% of women will be physically or sexually abused in their lifetime. Looking at the feminist movement, feminism is the belief that women and men should have equal rights and responsibilities. The United States feminist movement began in Seneca Falls, New York in 1848 when a group of women wrote and adopted a women's rights manifesto modeled after the Declaration of Independence. And class, during this first movement of the feminist movement, I guess is the best way to say it, it lasted from 1840 to 1920, and like I said, women did gain the right to vote in 1920, and I guess they were complacent with that because the movement died out. But then in the 1960s, there began a resurgence, an increase in the number of women in the labor force, the publication of Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique. There was an escalating divorce rate, certainly the social and political liberal climate of the time. Student activism, the establishment of the Commission on the Status of Women by John F. Kennedy was all a reason for the rebirth of feminism. I guess some of the forces that facilitated the rebirth of feminism is the best way to say it. The National Organization for Women, which is called NOW, was established in 1966. It remains one of the largest feminist organizations in the United States. As far as sexual harassment, this is a form of sex discrimination that violates Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. There are two types of sexual harassment. We have quid pro quo, in which an employer requires sexual favors in exchange for promotion, salary increase, or any other employee benefit. So we're talking about this for that, no sex, no job. Conditional harassment. And then, of course, hostile environment is anything, okay, such as jokes, comments, slurs, you name it, anything that creates a hostile environment. Affirmative action refers to a broad range of policies and practices to promote equal opportunity, as well as diversity in the workplace and on campuses. Affirmative action policies were developed in the 1960s from federal legislation. They do require that any employer, universities as well as a business, that receives contracts from the federal government must make good faith efforts to increase the number of female and other minority applicants.